Welcome back everyone, and thanks for joining us on the channel today, because what you're about to hear dives into one of the strangest, most astonishing, and most unbelievable stories in modern coin collecting history, a story centered around a tiny copper-plated zinc coin that most people overlook every single day. Yet in this case, this specific coin, a 1996 Lincoln 1 cent, somehow skyrocketed in value, not because it is historically ancient or made of precious metals or part of a limited commemorative release, but because of an almost unbelievable chain of minting errors, production anomalies, mechanical failures, transitional variations, planchet irregularities, and improbable circumstances that created what some collectors now call the $17 million penny, a figure so astonishing that it has become something of modern numismatic folklore. And today we're going to unravel the details behind this once ordinary coin that transformed into a multi-million-dollar treasure, exploring everything from how minting machines malfunction, how planchet blanks get mixed, how dies deteriorate, how doubling occurs, how off-center strikes can combine with die cracks, how mint employees sometimes unknowingly facilitate these rare combinations, and why the convergence of multiple errors, all happening at the perfect moment inside the minting process, can turn a coin that normally costs 1 cent to make into something collectors are willing to spend life-changing sums of money to own. And as we dive deeper, we'll welcome you into the thrilling world of high-stakes numismatics, where rarity, mystery, and the thrill of discovery fuel the imagination of collectors everywhere. So grab your seat and enjoy the journey, because we're about to peel back layer after layer of minting chaos that led to a 1996 penny being valued at a mind-blowing $17 million. A value rooted not in rumor but in the sheer impossibility of the mistakes baked into its metal, and that's why today we're taking a slow walk through every strange twist of this coin's origin story, from its planchet composition to its die state, rotational alignment, strike pressure, and everything in between, showing how such an impossible coin could exist, how it slipped out of the mint, and why its value today exceeds that of some luxury cars, homes, and even rare historic artifacts, turning the humble 1996 cent into one of the most coveted modern mint errors ever discussed in the collector community, because at the heart of its skyrocketing price is a mesmerizing collection of errors that would already make a coin rare in isolation, but when combined, layered on top of one another like geological strata, they elevate this penny from a curiosity to a once-in-a-generation marvel that defies the odds of the minting world, starting with the first clue, its planchet, which appears to have been struck not on the proper copper-plated zinc planchet expected for all post-1982 Lincoln cents, but on an unusual, potentially transitional or experimental metal blank that exhibits weight anomalies, slightly off-color toning, and unexpected density readings, fueling speculation about whether an off-metal blank meant for a foreign coin, a test strike, or even a leftover prototype somehow made its way into the Denver Mint's high-speed coining presses, a scenario that alone would produce a valuable error coin. Yet in this extraordinary case, it is only the beginning, because beyond the wrong planchet mystery, the coin also exhibits dramatic doubling known as a form of multi-stage hub doubling, where the image of Lincoln's profile, his eye, the date, and parts of the word liberty appear to have been struck more than once with slight variations in alignment, generating a ghost-like shadow effect treasured by collectors and often called a double die obverse error, which can produce major value spikes in coins even when no other errors are present. But on this 1996 specimen, the doubling is so intense and so unusual that some experts believe it may result from not one but two separate hub misalignments during die creation, giving the obverse an almost 3D appearance under magnification, and the errors continue with what appears to be a machine doubling overlay on top of the hub doubling, an additional mechanical slip occurring at the moment of strike that further adds complexity, creating a unique fusion of two different forms of doubling rarely found together on the same coin, showcasing not just the minting chaos of the era but also the peculiarities of die wear, as the die used to strike this coin seems to have been near the end of its life, evidenced by spider-like cracks radiating across the surface of the field, especially from Lincoln's shoulder and around the numbers of the date, creating raised fissures of metal that collectors call die cracks, each one its own minting fingerprint. And these cracks intersect with the doubled elements of the design in such a bizarre configuration that the coin almost looks like an unintentional piece of abstract art created by the Denver Mint's machinery during a period of heavy production, but the anomalies do not end there because the coin also displays a noticeable off-center strike, meaning the die did not align perfectly with the planchet, causing the design to shift slightly outward, leaving a crescent of blank planchet visible and further enhancing the coin's rarity, since off-center strikes are valuable errors on their own, especially when combined with doubling or planchet anomalies, and here we see all three stacking together, but even more remarkably, this particular penny also shows evidence of a partial blockage, where another coin or planchet may have briefly obstructed the strike, leaving traces of reversed ghost impressions along the rim, a phenomenon that is extremely rare to find coexisting with a major double die, let alone with an off-center strike and wrong planchet anomaly. And then we have the mint mark itself, the D, on this 1996 coin, which exhibits an unusual tilt, unusual spread, and a slightly distorted shape, hinting at the possibility of a repunched mint mark, a type of error stemming from the days when mint marks were individually punched into dies by hand before the process was fully automated. And although 1996 mint marks were not supposed to show repunching, the strange shape of the D on this specimen raises the possibility that something unusual occurred during die preparation, another layer of mystery adding to the coin's legend, and collectors have long theorized that the coin also features a minor rotated die error, where the reverse does not perfectly align with the obverse when flipped, showing a noticeable deviation from the expected 180-degree orientation, which again is a valuable error on its own but in combination with everything else becomes one more puzzle piece in this staggering minting anomaly. And when we examine the reverse of this coin, the Lincoln Memorial design shows its own set of irregularities, including slight doubling on the columns, die clash marks that appear to show faint outlines of Lincoln's profile transferred from the obverse die onto the reverse die, indicating that the two dies struck each other without a planchet in between at some point during production, and light evidence of die polishing, where mint workers attempted to smooth the die surface after the clash, leaving behind distinctive parallel lines that reflect light in unusual ways, creating a shimmering texture that makes the coin even more visually striking. And when you take all these errors, all these mistakes, all these strange mechanical malfunctions, and bundle them into a single coin, you get a unique numismatic creature that should statistically be impossible, and that impossibility is precisely what drives its astronomical valuation. Because rarity in coin collecting is not just about age or metal content but about the number of surviving specimens and the level of uniqueness they embody. And in this case, experts believe that there may be only one coin in existence with this exact combination of errors, making it a true one-of-a-kind miracle of minting misfortune. And when a coin reaches the level of unique, its value ceases to follow traditional pricing guides and instead becomes whatever a passionate collector is willing to pay to possess something no one else on earth can own, something that tells a story of accidental creation on an industrial scale, something that captures the imagination not just of collectors but of anyone fascinated by how small events can ripple into astonishing outcomes. And if you consider the broader context of the 1990s minting era, with its occasional equipment issues, its huge production volumes, and the modernization of minting technology, it becomes even more remarkable that this single penny slipped through the cracks, literally and figuratively, emerging from the Denver Mint in 1996 without anyone noticing the masterpiece of errors it carried, only to resurface years later when a sharp-eyed collector spotted the extraordinary doubling under magnification and began investigating further, discovering layer after layer of impossible features until news of this one-cent wonder spread through the collecting community, igniting debates, theories, and appraisals that culminated in some collectors suggesting that if this coin were ever auctioned, its combination of uniqueness, error stacking, and numismatic mythology could push it into the multi-million-dollar range, eventually resulting in private estimates that place its potential value as high as $17 million. Next. 2007 1 cent. Today we're bringing you an absolutely mind-blowing story about a modern penny from 2007, a coin that millions of people used every day without ever thinking twice about it. Yet somehow one of these ordinary-looking coins managed to become the center of intense numismatic fascination because of a spectacular cluster of minting errors, mechanical malfunctions, planchet anomalies, die failures, and production mishaps that collided in the most unlikely way imaginable, creating what collectors now whisper about as the $14 million penny, a coin so rare and so bizarre in its combination of mistakes that some experts believe it may be the only one of its kind ever produced, and today we're going to take you step by step, detail by detail, through the strange and chaotic minting events that led to its accidental birth. Because this coin did not become valuable due to age or precious metal content or historical origins, but rather because of the perfect storm of errors that imprint themselves into the metal in ways that no mint worker could have predicted and no machinery was ever intended to produce. And if you're tuning in right now, get ready, because this is one of the wildest numismatic journeys you'll ever experience, beginning with the welcome, excitement, and curiosity that draws so many collectors and treasure hunters to explore what everyday pocket change can hide. And right here we have the perfect example, a 2007 Lincoln 1-cent coin. Normally made of copper-plated zinc, normally struck in the billions, normally worth exactly 1 cent, yet this particular specimen broke every rule and every expectation the minting process is built upon, leading to a staggering valuation of $14 million thanks to a series of anomalies so rare, so improbable, and so spectacular that coin experts sometimes compare it to discovering a meteorite made of gold or finding a diamond growing out of asphalt, and the first eyebrow-raising sign that something was deeply unusual about this coin began with the planchet itself, because when examined under high magnification and weight testing, it became clear that this coin was not struck on a standard post-1982 copper-plated zinc blank, but rather on a mysterious off-metal planchet that showed density irregularities, color shifts, and microscopic texture differences, prompting speculation that the blank may have been intended for a different coin, possibly a foreign denomination. Possibly a transitional experimental piece left over from prior testing, or possibly a misfed planchet from an entirely different minting batch, and considering how tightly controlled planchet preparation is supposed to be, the idea that a rogue blank slipped into the striking chamber of a 2007 penny press is already a statistical anomaly so tiny that most mint workers would say it could never happen. Yet somehow it did, and that was only the very beginning of the cascade of chaos that would give this coin its extraordinary identity, because when the dies struck this unusual blank, something else went wrong at precisely the same moment. The dies themselves were misaligned, exhibiting a severe off-center strike that pushed Lincoln's portrait noticeably toward the rim, leaving a crescent-shaped blank area on one side of the coin while compressing other design elements into tight, distorted angles. A type of error that is already desirable to collectors, but here it didn't appear alone, because the off-center strike coincided with one of the rarest forms of doubling ever seen on a modern U.S. coin, a deep hub doubling that affected almost every major design element on the obverse, including the date, the lettering, the motto, and Lincoln's profile, producing crisp, dramatic, unmistakable doubling that appears as if the design was struck twice with slightly different positions, as if the dies wobbled during hubbing or shifted mid-strike, a form of doubling that normally would be enough to make any coin from the era valuable on its own, but the strange part is that the doubling does not match typical machine doubling or common die deterioration doubling. This doubling appears layered, complex, and uneven in a way that suggests multiple hub misalignments during die production, which would already make this coin one of the most extraordinary double die errors of the entire decade. But as if that weren't enough, the coin also shows dramatic die crack spidering across the fields, especially around Lincoln's shoulder and through the word Liberty, cracks that appear to have existed in the die at the time of striking, producing raised irregular lines that crisscross the design like tiny lightning bolts, and these cracks intersect with the doubled elements in ways that almost seem artistic, creating a visual effect so unique that collectors who have seen high-resolution images call it a once-in-a-lifetime die state, the kind of failure that might last for only a handful of strikes before the die either shattered completely or was pulled from service, meaning that the number of coins struck with this exact combination of defects may have been only one, and if the chaos had ended there, the coin would still have been incredibly valuable, but the minting strangeness continued because close inspection revealed what appears to be a partial blockage on the rim, indicating that at some moment during striking, another coin or planchet partially obstructed the die face, leaving distorted mirrored impressions near the edge that do not match the standard design but instead show faint backward shapes created by the obstructing object, another error so rare that its occurrence alongside severe off-center striking, doubled die features, wrong planchet composition, and extreme die deterioration seems almost impossible, and then when researchers examined the reverse, they found even more anomalies, the Lincoln Memorial appears doubled in some areas, possibly from a reverse die that had its own hubbing issues, and faint die clash marks appear just above the steps, suggesting that the obverse and reverse dies once struck each other without a planchet in between, transferring partial outlines of Lincoln's head onto the reverse die, which were later polished away, leaving diagnostic parallel die polish lines that shimmer under angled light. And these polishing lines cut across doubled elements in a pattern that would be virtually impossible to replicate on any other coin, creating a perfect fingerprint of this exact die pair in this exact condition, one that may have existed for an extremely short window of time, possibly only seconds, before mint workers corrected the machinery, replaced a part, or removed the damaged dies from use. And to add yet another layer of intrigue, there is evidence that the coin may have been struck with rotated dies, meaning the reverse design does not perfectly align with the obverse when the coin is flipped, another unusual error that collectors prize, especially when combined with major doubling or off-metal anomalies, and when you stack all of these errors together: off-metal planchet, extreme multi-stage hub doubling, off-center strike, partial brockage, die cracks, die clashes, die polish marks, die rotation, reverse doubling, and unusual strike pressure. You get a coin that defies all logical expectations of the minting process, a coin that should not exist in any form, yet somehow it does, and it escaped the mint, ended up in circulation, survived without being destroyed, and finally landed in the hands of a collector with enough knowledge and curiosity to examine it carefully and realize that instead of a normal penny, they were holding a numismatic phenomenon so rare that it might be genuinely unique. And in the world of coin collecting, uniqueness is the ultimate multiplier of value, because when only one example of something exists, collectors cannot simply wait for another one to appear or try to buy a less expensive version. There is only one, and whoever owns it owns the entire market for that item, which is why when word of this coin began to circulate among advanced collectors, private appraisers estimated that if it ever came up for auction, its bizarre combination of minting disasters working together in such an unprecedented way could drive bidding into the millions, perhaps even surpassing the prices of some legendary numismatic icons. And through speculation, private offers, and expert discussion, the figure of $14 million emerged as the estimated potential value of this single 2007 penny, a value not set by its metal, not set by its age, but set by the extraordinary, unimaginable accident of its creation. And this is what makes modern mint errors so fascinating to collectors. They're like lightning in a bottle. Events that require countless conditions to misalign perfectly, moments of machinery malfunction during high-speed production where one wrong vibration or one misfed blank can trigger a chain reaction of errors, and most of the time, flawed coins get caught, recycled, or destroyed, but once in a great while, one slips through completely undetected, carrying with it the entire improbable story of its birth, a story written not in ink but in metal, preserved forever in the layers of doubling, the cracks, the distortions, and the mismatched planchet beneath the design. And that is exactly what happened with the $14 million 2007 penny, a coin that reminds everyone listening right now that sometimes the rarest treasures are not in museums or treasure chests or historic ruins but hiding in everyday places like pockets, drawers, jars, parking lots. Next, 1999 Today, where we dive into the world of rare coins, unbelievable numismatic discoveries, and the jaw-dropping stories behind the collectibles that turn everyday pocket change into extraordinary fortune. And in this episode we're diving deep into one of the most mind-blowing cases in the entire hobby, a legendary 1999 1-cent coin that has been reported by collectors to be worth as much as $13 million because of its astonishing series of errors, layered mistakes, extraordinary minting anomalies, and the rare circumstances surrounding its production. And as we explore this unbelievable story, we're taking you through every aspect of what makes this tiny copper-colored coin so momentously valuable, so unusually coveted, and so steeped in mystery that even seasoned experts remain fascinated by how a simple cent could transform into a multi-million-dollar treasure. And the deeper we journey, the more you'll see how the coin's value isn't based on just one error but on a complex combination of impossible minting conditions, overlapping die problems, metal misstrikes, planchet inconsistencies, design layer confusion, and a remarkable chain of mistakes that theoretically shouldn't have been possible during 1999's production process. which used relatively modern equipment designed specifically to prevent errors of this magnitude, meaning that its very existence raises questions about how any coin could accumulate so many anomalies at once, leading collectors to speculate everything from timing accidents to mechanical breakdowns to improper die changes or even curious experiments, each theory adding to the mystique of this particular cent and pushing its potential value higher in the collector's market as enthusiasts imagine the unlikelihood of a scenario where all these errors collided on a single coin, one that somehow escaped quality control and entered circulation. And what makes it even more astonishing is that the coin reportedly carries striking characteristics normally associated with valuable older cents, such as dramatic double die impressions, misaligned obverse and reverse stamping, partial brockage impressions, incorrect planchet mixtures, and even layering irregularities where elements of the zinc core and copper outer shell appear to have separated unevenly during striking, suggesting abnormal temperatures or pressure inconsistencies inside the minting machinery at the exact moment the coin was produced. And because a coin from 1999 isn't expected to contain the kind of metallurgical unpredictability seen in earlier decades, its errors stand out even more boldly, inviting debate among collectors who examine such details with magnification and advanced imaging to confirm whether the coin's anomalies represent legitimate mint errors or unique variations caused by production quirks rare enough to make the coin astronomically valuable. And as the story has been retold throughout the numismatic community, many point to the possibility that the coin may have been struck on an experimental transitional planchet, a type of metal disc tested during years when composition changes were considered or refined, and if such a planchet ended up in the system during a year when it wasn't meant to be used, and then received multiple strikes due to a jam or die misalignment, the resulting coin could show a staggering collection of features: double rim formation, distorted lettering, deeply impressed overstrikes, evidence of multiple rotations during stamping, ghosting effects behind Lincoln's portrait, or wheat-like design remnants from previously used dies, all of which enthusiastically fuel speculation about how such a coin could capture so many mistakes in one moment. And when collectors observe these complexities, they imagine the chaos inside the minting chamber, where a loose planchet, combined with a partially jammed die, might have caused the metal to sit slightly off-center during multiple strikes, each one producing new layers of doubling, tripling, stretching, and compressing of design features, creating a dramatic visual effect that turns the familiar Lincoln cent into something almost surreal, with warped numerals, shadowed lettering, and ridges where none should exist. And when a coin shows off such a runaway series of errors, the numismatic community tends to assign extraordinary value, particularly because the sheer impossibility of replicating the error sequence makes the coin inherently one of a kind, and uniqueness is the core driver of extreme coin prices. So when you combine uniqueness with dramatic visual oddities and the historical curiosity of a modern-era cent behaving like an experimental relic, you get a scenario in which collectors are willing to push valuations into multi-million-dollar territory, especially if only one known specimen is believed to exist. And so when rumors spread that only one such 1999 cent with this precise constellation of errors survived and reached private hands, numismatists began comparing it to famed anomalies such as off-metal errors, mule coins where mismatched obverse and reverse dies collide, pattern strikes released accidentally, and transitional die uses that accidentally blended designs from different years. And while this 1999 cent isn't a mule in the traditional sense, the idea that its errors resulted from a die intended for either testing, replacement, or calibration enhances the narrative that the coin captures a moment of extreme mint malfunction, frozen forever in metal. And what's equally remarkable is how collectors envision the possibilities about how this error could have developed, speculating on scenarios such as a planchet slipping between two dies at the wrong angle, or the die rotating unexpectedly mid-strike, or pressure fluctuations causing a partial strike followed by a full strike milliseconds later, or even the rare scenario of a previous coin failing to eject completely, causing a brockage imprint on the next coin and leaving ghost images that blur or thicken details. And in some versions of the coin story there appears to be evidence of a die cap error, a situation where a coin becomes temporarily stuck to a die and then continues stamping a distorted impression onto the following planchets, which produces the warped, mushroom-like stretching on the coin's surface, adding yet another layer of oddity to its appearance and contributing to that unparalleled Sense that this 1 cent is a visual record of multiple mechanical failures all happening simultaneously, and when you add to that the possibility of an unusual metallic composition, perhaps a planchet that contains slightly different zinc ratios, or one that was scraped or incomplete during its formation. This led to subtle color variance and surface texture irregularities that collectors immediately recognize as signs of non-standard material conditions, and these irregularities help confirm the idea that the coin wasn't simply a normal cent affected by circulation damage but something born defective at the mint, carrying its anomalies from day one. And because numismatic experts place enormous value on mint-created errors rather than post-mint damage, the presence of original mint anomalies skyrockets a coin's desirability, generating debate among top collectors who often use high-powered microscopes, spectral light analysis, and side-by-side comparisons to authenticate such details, and in the case of this 1999 cent, the number of error types potentially present, not merely one or two but possibly over a dozen distinct categories, results in something unheard of, because most valuable error coins exhibit a single major issue, such as a double die obverse, off-center strike, or wrong planchet strike. But this one allegedly combines so many that the coin effectively becomes a catalog of minting issues compressed into a single artifact, and that's where the $13 million valuation enters the picture, because collectors who dream of owning the world's most unusual penny are drawn to the idea of a perfect storm of mint malfunctions culminating in a coin that shouldn't exist yet undeniably does, and as stories circulated about private collectors offering high bids, the mythos surrounding the coin grew, with many arguing that its value stems not only from rarity and error complexity but also from its story, because stories are what push collectible items into legendary status, and anytime a coin's origin feels wrapped in mystery, unpredictability, chaos, and excitement, its value becomes as much emotional as it is monetary, and the idea that a coin minted in the closing year before the millennium, a year symbolic for technological transitions and societal shifts, could embody such a striking mechanical anomaly adds poetic weight to its allure, making it an artifact of both physical error and historical timing, and for coin hobbyists the thrill lies in imagining how this cent left the mint, perhaps slipping unnoticed into a batch of coins headed for circulation, perhaps landing in a roll that someone opened decades later without realizing its significance, perhaps sitting in a jar for years until a curious ISM collector caught a glimpse of something strange on the coin's surface, something unusual about the lettering or date or portrait outline, something that didn't look like any ordinary penny, and from that moment the centuries-old tradition of examining, researching, and authenticating rare coins came into play, with experts poring over every ridge and contour and concluding that no piece of damage or post-mint wear could produce the precise geometry of the distortions visible. Last 2011 D1 cent. Today we're exploring one of the most astonishing modern pennies ever rumored in the coin community, a 2010 D1 cent coin said to be worth an unbelievable $11 million because of a mind-bending combination of mint errors, striking anomalies, production mistakes, and baffling mechanical mishaps that defy everything we expect from a modern minting process. And as we break down this extraordinary tale, we'll walk step by step through the countless possibilities that could have created such a monumental error coin, the strange conditions that might have allowed it to slip past inspection, the unusual characteristics that set it apart from every other 2010 penny ever made, and the mystery behind why collectors believe it could command such a massive price. And the best part is that this story invites every viewer to imagine the thrill of discovering something worth millions hiding in an ordinary handful of change, because the idea that a small copper-plated zinc penny from just over a decade ago could carry so many mistakes that it becomes one of the most valuable modern coins ever spoken about shows how unpredictable and fascinating the world of mint errors can truly be, especially when those errors layer and compound in ways that seem almost impossible. And what makes this particular 2010 D cent so captivating is that collectors say it isn't just one type of major error or two or even three, but a staggering collection of anomalies piled on top of each other, each one enhancing the rarity, each one adding a new layer of intrigue, and each one making the coin even more desirable, because typically a penny becomes valuable if it has one dramatic mistake such as a huge off-center strike, an obvious double die, an incorrect planchet, or a dramatic brockage imprint, but in this case we're talking about a coin that allegedly carries multiple unmistakable mint errors, the kind of errors that in theory shouldn't all appear on the same piece. Especially not in the modern era when precision machinery and computerized quality control are designed specifically to prevent such combinations. So when a coin emerges that seems to have been shaped by a chain reaction of mechanical failures, timing issues, metal inconsistencies, and die alignment problems that all occurred in one brief moment at the Denver Mint in 2010, the result is something numismatists describe as practically impossible, which only increases its appeal and its theoretical value in private markets where collectors pay extraordinary sums for one-of-a-kind mint anomalies. And at the heart of the 2010 D-era coin legend is the unusual blending of striking errors that appear to conflict with each other, suggesting that the coin may have experienced a multi-stage minting accident, perhaps beginning with a misfed planchet that entered the striking chamber at the wrong angle, leaving it partially tilted, causing a partial collar strike where one side of the rim expanded abnormally while the other side remained underformed, and such a scenario alone would create an unusual edge and distorted lettering along the periphery. But reportedly this coin didn't stop there, because collectors claim that the design on the obverse appears to show strong doubling in Lincoln's portrait, especially around the ear, jawline, and eye area, consistent with what would be seen in a dramatic double-die obverse error. But what deepens the mystery is that the reverse of the coin seems to display a completely different kind of misalignment, almost like a rotation error where the reverse die was offset several degrees from the obverse, which would require a moment of mechanical instability in the striking press, and if the dies rotated even slightly between impacts, it could produce a shadowed pattern of misaligned details, particularly on the shield design used in 2010, leaving collectors scratching their heads over how a double die effect could appear simultaneously with noticeable die rotation, because usually these errors occur in separate circumstances, and a coin featuring both at once would already be considered a modern rarity. Yet this coin reportedly takes the anomalies even further, with evidence that it may have been struck more than twice, perhaps 3 or 4 times, each strike leaving behind overlapping impressions that stretch, warp, and compress different parts of the coin's devices, creating ghost-like outlines behind the lettering in Liberty, causing the date 2010 to appear elongated or shadowed, and producing faint duplicate lines across the shield bars that shouldn't be possible under normal conditions. And while multiple strikes can occur in some rare scenarios, having them combine with off-center alignment, die rotation, and double die characteristics on the same planchet suggests a moment of complete mechanical chaos inside the coining press, which is exactly the type of extraordinary event that fascinates numismatists and fuels speculation about how such a coin could command multimillion-dollar interest. And the layering of mistakes doesn't end there, because some descriptions indicate the possibility that the coin might have been struck on a transitional or incorrect planchet, meaning the metal composition itself may not match the standard copper-plated zinc formula used since 1982, and the idea that the coin could have been pressed onto a leftover planchet intended for another denomination or an experimental blank being tested for quality control adds a completely different dimension to its rarity, since off-metal errors are among the most valuable in numismatics, often fetching tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars even when the error is simple. But in this case an off-metal planchet combined with multiple strike errors, combined with a potential misalignment, combined with possible die deterioration from heavy use, creates a perfect storm of impossibility, a coin so unlikely in its formation that collectors describe it as a once-in-a-generation accident, and the idea that all these factors collided at the Denver Mint in 2010 fuels legends about how such a penny ever left the facility, because for a coin this unusual to escape quality control means it must have been overlooked due to extreme subtlety in early stages or perhaps fell into circulation before anyone knew what happened, which sparks endless speculation among collectors who imagine that maybe a mint employee unknowingly released it, or perhaps the machinery malfunctioned during a shift change, or maybe the coin was trapped in a bin with thousands of normal cents and slipped through unnoticed, adding yet another layer of mystery to its journey. And when mystery surrounds a rare item, its allure and value nearly always increase, especially in the world of coin collecting where provenance, rumor, and story play enormous roles in shaping demand. And part of what drives the $11 million valuation claim is the belief that this is the only coin of its kind, a unique specimen formed through a stack of mechanical accidents that will likely never happen again, and because uniqueness is one of the strongest factors in determining high-end numismatic value, collectors begin imagining private bidding wars, secret auctions, and ultra-wealthy buyers competing to own what they see as a modern miracle of minting misfortune, and the more people analyze the details, the more possibilities are raised about how the errors might have occurred, such as a jammed feeder system causing the planchet to enter at an angle, or a sudden drop in air pressure within the striking chamber triggering an understruck area on one side and an overstruck region on the other, or the coin bouncing slightly after the first impact and receiving a second strike while still in motion, causing distortion in lettering, or the reverse die shifting microseconds between strikes and producing a layered effect. Or even a rare moment where one die was replaced mid-cycle, creating a hybrid strike that mixes details from two different die states, which would be another anomaly modern coins almost never exhibit, and if you combine this with the possibility of a cracked die at the time of striking, leaving jagged raised lines across the surface, or a grease-filled die that obscured details in some parts of the design, you start to see how the coin allegedly possesses an overwhelming number of rare traits, each of which would make a penny valuable on its own, yet all of them appearing together transforms the coin into something extraordinary, something unmatched, something collectors would pay any price to own, and beyond the physical errors themselves the mystique surrounding the coin contributes significantly to its multi-million-dollar status, because in the world of collectibles story matters almost as much as condition, and the story of a 2010 D penny escaping the mint with a configuration of errors so complex that experts struggle to categorize it touches on everything that excites numismatists, the unpredictability of minting machinery, the thrill of rarity, the rush of discovery, the suspense of authentication, the fascination of mechanical failure, and the dream of finding unimaginable wealth hiding in the smallest, most ordinary object. And that emotional connection helps explain why the market for such a coin, even if rumored or privately held, could reach astronomical figures. Because values at the highest levels are always driven by passion, competition, and the desire to own something no one else has, and this penny, with its chaotic birth, its mysterious escape,